The gods have always been portrayed as beings of immense power, confident and supreme rulers of the cosmos. So why would they need to hide things? What secrets could possibly be so valuable or so dangerous that they would be locked away from all of creation? Across mythology, there are locations that weren't just dangerous, they were deliberately forbidden. These were not realms of the dead or primordial voids, but tangible places on our world's edge, hidden behind magical barriers and guarded by monstrous entities. The gods did not want mortals here, and the reason why is always more interesting than the lock on the door. Our first location is perhaps the most famous divine vault in history, the Garden of the Hesperides. Hidden on the westernmost edge of the world, bathed in the red light of the sunset, was a grove that belonged to Hera, the queen of the gods. This garden was her most prized possession, for in its center grew a tree that bore solid gold apples. But their value wasn't in the metal. A single bite from one of these apples granted the one thing that truly separated humans from their creators: immortality. This was the gods' ultimate power, and they had no intention of sharing it. This is why the garden was forbidden. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was a matter of cosmic law. To prevent any mortal from stumbling upon the secret to eternal life, Hera established a multi-layered security system. First, she placed the Hesperides, beautiful nymphs of the evening, to tend the grove. But knowing temptation might be too great even for them, she added a final, terrifying guardian. Coiled around the base of the tree slept Ladon, a 100-headed dragon. Each head was eternally vigilant, and none of them ever slept at the same time. The garden was forbidden because it held the key to godhood, and the gods enforced their monopoly with a living wall of sleepless, draconic fury. From a garden of light we journey east to a place that existed only in whispers and mist, Mount Penglai. In Chinese mythology, Penglai was one of several mystical islands in the Bohai Sea, but it was the most sought after. It was said to be the home of the 8 immortals and other divine beings, a place where pain and winter did not exist. The palaces were made of gold and platinum, and everything on the island was a pristine, ethereal white, from the animals to the birds to the trees. The gods forbade entry to Penglai, not with a monster, but with magic. The island was hidden, actively repelling mortals. For centuries, Chinese emperors, desperate to live forever, would send vast fleets in search of it. As their ships would approach, a sudden, impenetrable mist would descend, or violent storms would rise from a calm sea, driving them back. Sometimes, sailors would report seeing the island's shimmering peaks from a distance, only for it to recede as they sailed closer, forever remaining just out of reach. The reason for this divine concealment was simple. Penglai held the ultimate treasure, the elixir of life. The food and wine found on the island, grown from its magical soil, would grant anyone who consumed them eternal life. The gods hid the entire island to protect this secret, ensuring that mortality remained the unchangeable fate of humankind, no matter how powerful an emperor became. Next, we descend from a mystical mountain into the belly of a volcano, to a place of suffocating heat and cosmic power, the Forge of Hephaestus. Hephaestus was the Greek god of blacksmiths, craftsmen, and fire. He was an outcast, cast from Mount Olympus by his own mother, Hera, because of his physical imperfections. He found his solace and his power not in the pristine halls of the gods, but deep within the fiery heart of volcanoes like Mount Etna. This was his sacred workspace, his personal sanctuary, and it was absolutely forbidden to all others. The prohibition was twofold. First, there was the sheer physical danger. This was a place of molten rock, poisonous fumes, and earth-shaking power that no mortal could survive. But more importantly, it was forbidden because of what Hephaestus was making. This forge was the divine factory for the god's greatest weapons and artifacts. The thunderbolts Zeus used to command the storms, the helm of darkness that allowed Hades to become invisible, the impenetrable armor worn by the hero Achilles, all were hammered into existence here. The gods forbade entry to protect their secrets of power. The forge held the blueprints to divine technology. To allow a mortal inside would be to risk leaking the knowledge of how to build weapons capable of challenging the gods themselves. Hephaestus, the scorned and solitary craftsman, guarded these secrets with a territorial fury, ensuring the power of creation remained in divine hands. From a volcano's heart, we travel to the cradle of civilization, to a Mesopotamian paradise with a deadly entrance, Dilmon. In the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the hero Gilgamesh, grieving the death of his friend and terrified of his own mortality, embarks on a quest to find the secret to eternal life. His journey takes him to the edge of the known world, to find the one man who had ever escaped death, Utnapishtim, a survivor of the Great Flood who was granted immortality by the gods. The gods placed Utnapishtim in a paradise called Dilmon, a place where there was no sickness or death. But the gods did not want anyone following him. To reach Dilmon, Gilgamesh had to pass through an impossible set of divine barriers. The path was guarded by two terrifying scorpion men, beings whose aura is awesome and whose glance is death. When they allowed him to pass, he then had to travel through 12 leagues of absolute, crushing darkness. Finally, he had to cross the waters of death, an ocean so lethal that a single touch would mean instant oblivion. This series of trials was the prohibition. The gods forbade entry to Dilmon because it held two things: Utnapishtim, the living proof that their laws of mortality could be bent, and a magical plant that grew at the bottom of the sea, which could restore a person's youth. The gods hid both the man and the plant behind a deadly, divinely engineered obstacle course to ensure the fundamental secret of the cosmos, that all men must die, was never discovered. Our fifth location is an island shrouded in the magical mists of the Celtic otherworld, the grove of Emyne Ablach. In Irish mythology, the otherworld was a parallel dimension, the realm of the gods known as the Tuatha De Danann. Emyne Ablach, the Isle of Apple Trees, was one of its most sacred and protected domains. It was a land of eternal spring, where apple trees bore fruit and flowers at the same time, and no mortal was ever meant to set foot. The prohibition here was a magical veil woven by the powerful sea god, Manannán mac Lir. He was the gatekeeper of the otherworld, and he surrounded these islands with an impenetrable mist that confused sailors and hid the realm from mortal eyes. You couldn't find Emyne Ablach unless the god himself wished you to, effectively forbidding entry to all of humanity. The reason for this powerful enchantment was to guard a specific, potent artifact of divine magic. The chief treasure of the island was a silver apple branch. It wasn't meant for eating. When this branch was shaken, it produced a melody so pure and so supernaturally beautiful that it could lull an entire army to sleep, make a wounded man forget his agony, and erase all sorrow from a person's mind. It was a tool of absolute peace, but also a form of divine mind control, a power too subtle and too profound for the mortal world. The gods hid it away, not because it could kill, but because it could erase the very will to live. The sixth forbidden place is not a garden or an island, but a simple well, holding the most valuable substance in the cosmos, Mimir's well. In Norse mythology, at the roots of the great world tree Yggdrasil, lay a well that did not contain water. It was a well of pure, concentrated wisdom. This was Mimir's well, and it was guarded by the wise and ancient being, Mimir, who drank from it every day. The knowledge it held was so powerful, so fundamental to the understanding of the universe, that the gods themselves coveted it. The place was forbidden by the immense price of entry. The prohibition wasn't a monster, but a trade. When Odin, the king of the Norse gods, came seeking a drink, Mimir refused him until a worthy sacrifice was made. To gain access to this cosmic knowledge, Odin had to tear out his own eye and drop it into the well. Only then was he allowed a single sip. The gods protected this well because it was the ultimate source of strategic intelligence. It held secrets of the past and glimpses of the future. By keeping it guarded by Mimir, and later by Mimir's reanimated head, Odin ensured he had a private, forbidden source of knowledge that no other god, giant or mortal, could access without being willing to pay a horrific physical price. Our final location is the most terrifying of all, a place mortals could enter, but from which they could never truly return, the Cave of Trophonius. In ancient Greece, this was a real-world oracle, but it was dreaded. It was known as an entrance to the underworld, where you could speak directly to the spirit of the hero Trophonius. To get a prophecy, a person had to go through days of intense rituals before being led to a small opening in the earth. There they were pulled in feet first by an unseen force. The prohibition here was not a lock or a guardian, but a guaranteed and horrifying consequence. The gods decreed that any mortal who entered the chasm to receive their answer would be so overwhelmed by the raw divine truth they witnessed that it would shatter their psyche. They would emerge from the cave pale and terrified, having permanently lost the ability to ever feel joy again. For the rest of their lives, they would never smile. The gods forbade this place by making the price of knowledge a fate worse than death. They were hiding an unfiltered, direct vision of the divine, a truth so potent it would break any mortal mind that experienced it. They protected humanity from this secret the only way they could, by ensuring that anyone who learned it would serve as a walking, joyless warning to all others who might dare to seek it.